Good afternoon. My name is Marella Lucas, and this is my productive and counterproductive behaviors in the workplace assignment. This is for Psychology 516, Industrial Organizational Psychology at Liberty University with Dr. Walling. Throughout the answers to my questions, I will reference the course textbook by Jackson Britt, written in 2014, the book being titled Organizational Psychology, a Scientist-Practitioner Approach. For the first question, how have recent historical events affected the course of research in organizational psychology? So for those of us here today, we will talk about what organizational psychology is, being a scientific study of behaviors of individuals and groups, working and contributing in formal organizational settings. The psychology aspect really focuses on individual behavior, and we know that individual behavior in organizations is impacted by the group and cultural climate of the organization. It's really important to acknowledge organizational psychology as a scientific study and knowledge gained, permitting practical application of learnings. Recent historical events that have influenced organizational psychology are noted by Jackson Britt as the retirement process due to the aging population, emergency preparedness subsequent to the 9/11 national crisis, communication technology rapidly changing and developing, affecting how people work, unemployment post the 2008 economic recession, and the increasing globalization of work, that people can work remotely and they can interact across countries as part of work teams. The historical event that I'll focus on is communication technology, and really as organizations, how we need to be careful to acknowledge how this is impacting our employees. So everyone sees all those around us with their cell phone in hand. This permits access to email and communications 24/7. With recent remote work, meetings can happen from anywhere, from your drive to the school with the kids in the car, to the office, no matter time of day. This degree of accessibility and this feeling of always being on is a concern. Although having technology to assist in work being done in a flexible manner assists with blending of life and work, it also blurs boundaries. In my personal assessment, one thing I would be cognizant of as an employer is the cause it may have on work-family conflict, that causal relationship that it might impact both time and strain of how a person operates in those two domains. The resulting outcome of this technological advancement in terms of our communication tools is really, as we've discussed, that ability to work at any and all hours of the day. There is research seeking to understand how people create boundaries, and it's questionable how sustainable this is. Maybe we're optimizing performance, but is it for the long term? Are we keeping our highest performing employees retained? The question is posed, what activities help people recover? So if this is draining of energy, how do we recoup people and recover them and make sure they're refreshed to offer their optimal work contribution? And where we believe we've gained efficiency and productivity, at what cost have we gained that? The second question that I'll address today is to describe the socialization process for graduate students in your program. Is the program successful in socializing newcomers and creating job embeddedness? So from a personal perspective, attraction really occurs prior to socialization, and that was definitely experienced as I considered Liberty as my school of choice. I would peruse the website, look at different posted ratings, and this was my first interface with the organization. The socialization process really started with being accepted, receiving the acceptance letter, receiving the sticker that said that I was a Liberty University member. I had already determined kind of my fit as it related to the values displayed and the imagery used to convey the school's mission. Really, the advertising of graduate programs is very similar to recruiting, and the goal being to generate your applicants instead of your candidates, and really provide your service to the most and the best fitted. Britain checks speak to the loss of personal touch with the technological methods now used, and definitely as an online learner, some of that is seen and experienced. But Liberty does a great job in socializing individuals in a way that makes them feel connected with the campus despite being off campus. All of my automated calls and voicemails provide a friendly voice that relay messages related to the school and registration and upcoming deadlines. I get email communications to both my personal email as well as my school email, and they're all really seeking to connect me to news regarding the school, and they keep me on track in terms of school requirements. In my experience, the school website and the learning platforms convey a sense of school spirit, faith-based support, a love of learning, and a call to excellence. That's all very important to me. Feldman from 1981 really describes these different stages, and kind of the encounter stage for me is when the course includes the student introductions and those professor introductions that may be recorded, and again for me offers kind of a personal connection in a technological world. Formal socialization step seems to be the course checklist, and that highlights just some cultural elements, that commitment to discouraging plagiarism and things like that. And really there are just a number of different modalities used to create connection. The attire and Liberty gear for next steps in registering is one way that T-shirt provided offers a sense of identity, that you are a member of the school and that you will be an alumni of the school. I would say that ultimately the interactions, the discussion posts, the course feedback, all of it creates this wraparound experience that fosters feeling welcomed, socialized, and truly embedded. As I've advanced in my coursework, I experience comfort and pride and commitment, and it really bolsters my sense of fitting in and loyalty. And I do really feel that Liberty has been successful in making me a true organizational member. For question 3, how can organizations reduce or prevent work-family conflict? I think this is a really important question, specifically as it relates to the values that people bring to the workplace. For me personally, my family is of utmost importance, and so an organization that acknowledges that there is work-family conflict is really important. This is a heavily researched subset of the more general work-non-work interface, so some may not have the same family obligations, but any obligations outside of work or interests outside of work can create conflict where there's an interaction either negatively or positively. Conflict really being the negative perspective, positive being kind of enrichment and facilitation, where work and work performance can be affected. Really, work-family conflict stems from individuals having various roles to fulfill, and so dependent on the point in your life, it might be children, it might be aging parents, it might simply be acting as a spouse and taking that role very seriously in terms of honoring your marriage. Work-family conflict can be bi-directional, so family can interfere with work and work can interfere with family. So employers have something to learn and to gain in terms of understanding this clearly. Greenhouse and Botel from 1980s divided work-family conflict into 3 types and talked about time, strain, and behavior-based. It was referenced that in 2005, 25 to 50% of working adults claimed to have experienced work-family conflict, so definitely a really important area for an organization to be aware of and to proactively address. Job factors, individual factors, and family factors all affect this work-family conflict. The evidence suggests that connecting with your coworkers and seeking mentorship for support can have positive effect. So to find someone who's managing work and life well and juggling different roles and responsibilities can be inspirational and helpful in terms of instituting similar effective management styles for yourself. It is really important that organizations do have formal policies that support outside of work obligations and priorities, that individuals are seen as whole people, that they have lives outside of work, and that those need to be honored, and that it's in the best interest of the individual and the company to create balance there for those individuals. What's most critical is that the environment and the leadership really embrace those policies and honor those, and the culture doesn't have a message contrary to what the policy provides. Jackson and Britt go on to talk about supervisor supportive behaviors and really that leader-employee relationship. So for a leader to acknowledge and support that work-life balance realities exist and need tending to, and ultimately can make work better or worse, is necessary, and it's best that leaders are engaged in making it better, that there's a reduction in the conflictual nature of these two responsibilities and the times in which they interact with one another, interfere with one another. Ultimately, what's really exciting is that you can have work-family enrichment or work-family facilitation, and that's each positively affecting the other. In terms of integration and flexibility, as already discussed, people have different tolerances for this, and it can be helpful that an individual is autonomous in deciding how they integrate their life and work and how they achieve both roles and what works best for them individually. Question 4, you've been asked to develop a performance assessment program for employee development. What techniques could you use to adequately evaluate employee performance as comprehensively as possible? So in terms of productive work behavior, job performance is really critical to discuss and to identify, to assess accurately, and to understand really what it is and what we're trying to achieve by assessing it. It is challenging to define job performance, and not all that people do that is helpful or harmful is related to the job description. Campbell from 1990 asserts that performance must be distinguished from effectiveness, productivity, and utility. And there are two major categories of job performance: in-role performance and extra-role performance. Examples of extra-role skills and demonstrations of ability are communication, enthusiasm, exhibiting teamwork. Murphy's 1994 model of job performance outlines 4 performance dimensions. So 1 is in-role and 3 are extra-role or outside of the role. In-role is task-oriented behaviors, so this is really that focus on job description, the contribution of fulfilling what's actually required of you in terms of fulfilling that position, being an employee with a specific job. Extra-role includes interpersonally oriented behaviors, downtime behaviors, and destructive behaviors. It's very critical to develop a fair and consistent way to evaluate employees. There's recognition that a large contribution to the workplace is actions and behaviors that may be defined as extra role. So when looking at an ideal employee or assessing an employee's job performance, things beyond the job description might actually best determine fit and competency in terms of how that individual gets their work done and achieves that job description. Jackson and Britt describe by definition that job performance is behavior, and this makes it very challenging to measure. Murphy, 1989, articulates performance can be measured in 8 different ways: paper and pencil testing, job skills test, on-site or off-site hands-on testing, simulation methods, tasks ratings, and global ratings. And it's commented that the most common is rating performance on select tasks as well as global ratings. This is a classic employee evaluation where you rate performance, and some of it is based on the job description, and other components might be more global in nature in terms of someone's communication or style, adherence to company values, things like that. Techniques to adequately evaluate employee performance, being comprehensive in nature is really critical, and it requires that the tool is multidimensional. Really, task performance should occur in an ongoing fashion with prompt feedback provided throughout the employment period and not simply at a time of formal evaluation. And assessment and feedback of citizenship behaviors provides for well-rounded feedback about how your work is done, not just what work is done. So perhaps you have objective goals and you're able to achieve them, but if in doing so interdepartmental team relationships are damaged, it's really important for long-term success to address some of that sportsmanship, some of that communication, some of that trust and transparency, so that individuals can continue to be successful in fulfilling the job. Global ratings can be specific to technical skill as well as interpersonal skills, and providing different perspectives is really a helpful way to convey a valid message. So an example would be the 360 evaluation process, where there's a self-evaluation, a leader evaluation, and perhaps a peer evaluator included as well. I would recommend transparency with a 1-up can really sharpen honest assessment and ensure that those involved in advancement decisions are in agreement with key findings. So for instance, if I report to the VP, what would it look like for the CEO to review my evaluation? Would they assess me the same? Would they identify that my strengths are what I'm being told they are? Or would they coach me in a different manner in a weakness they've observed? And that then would help me in the future secure better success and perhaps promotion. Ultimately, ratings should be fair and consistent and helpful, and a leader should coach direct reports to success. Feedback needs to be honest and actionable, driving ever-learning and ever-progressing workplace performance. Constructive feedback is really critical, that it's effective in minimizing or eliminating harmful work products or practices. And trending data can really help demonstrate how an employee is progressing in their performance. One point of discussion is really this notion of narrow levels when in evaluating employees. So if there's a competent, highly competent, and top performer, for example, what are the points of fine delineation, and how do we make those clear to employees, and how do employees fairly and successfully achieve advancement across the levels? Another notion important to identify is that growth should occur at all levels, and there's kind of this new found way of learning, and it's this kind of lattice of opportunity approach that not every promotion needs to be a ladder promotion. You can create a diversity of skills, and you can really gratify individuals and benefit the company by current employees taking different assignments, even if not traditional promotion. Question 5, what are some possible common organizational constraints, and how could they lead to counterproductive behaviors? So counterproductive behaviors hinder workplace productivity and progress. It's anything that subtracts instead of is neutral or adds to. By definition, they're behaviors that a person consciously decides to engage in, and the behavior harms the organization or people within the organization. I think it's really important to talk about Spectre and those who propose the 5 categories: production deviance, sabotage, theft, withdrawal, and abuse towards others. And to acknowledge the person and situation interaction that generates counterproductive behaviors, that sometimes it is mostly the person, sometimes perhaps mostly the situation, definitely likely that both the person and situation are interacting in such a way that the output becomes this counterproductive behavior. In the textbook, there's some credit given to norms, stress, and injustice as some solution-based causes. And what's great about identifying the organization as a catalyst for or kind of a solve to prevent or heal is that the organization can intentionally focus on proactive management of these areas of workplace culture. So all the way from hiring, acknowledging individual traits that diminish likelihood of counterproductive behaviors, such as conscientiousness and self-control. Simply being aware of this and attending to this may assist in fruitful talent management and onboarding. Really, there's not a way to test who's most likely to contribute in this negative way, and so you can't really fully prevent. Another restraint on behalf of the organization in terms of just being an employer of people and kind of the human condition is that once the employee's on site, an employer cannot be everywhere, and counterproductive behaviors may or may not be identified. And they have to be identified to be corrected. And so it's really important that a leader stays close to his or her people, and that climate is really pulse checked, and that this happens through a number of different ways to understand how people are contributing and what's providing forward motion. One thing I thought was interesting and that needs to be considered is that individuals can be very skilled at impression management, and they can assure that counterproductive behaviors are infrequent enough or out of sight enough that it's hard to really trend that. Another issue in terms of just real constraint experience in managing human behavior is it might be hard to validate in terms of the harm to the organization of others, harm to the organization or others. So, for instance, lack of presence by an employee might have these intangible effects, but if they're always accessible by email and phone and responsive to email and attentive to deadlines, how do you really convey to them that this is counterproductive behavior, that you've assessed it as such, and that you believe that it will have a negative consequence? Another question in terms of legitimate constraint in trying to manage this is how do you measure time waste and production deviance? So if you've really accepted this integration of personal matters and quick fulfilling breaks for an individual are helpful in them sustaining job performance, is this contributing to their wellness and longevity and role, or is this counterproductive? What is going to be the consequence of some of those behaviors that they're engaging in? I think also workplace incivility can be difficult to determine amongst many different perceptions. It's really easy to say that a person's style is simply direct versus being perceived as disrespectful. In any case, what's critical is that counterproductive behaviors have to be identified before they can be corrected. And you want to ensure that you're promoting the behaviors that are deemed productive, both to the organization and to those in the work teams contributing to the organization's vision and mission. I think in summary to this question, ways in which an organization might be constrained is just literally around those hiring tools, those monitoring capabilities, quantifying job performance standards met, clarifying perception, and really determining effect of counterproductive behaviors in such a way that they can be addressed and they don't go unbridled. Thank you so much.